Welcome everybody. We'll give you just a couple of minutes to hop in here with us tonight. We're excited that you're joining us on these this office hours tonight. I've been out of the loop for a little bit. My friend Chuck here has been doing an awesome job of filling in and continuing since he's my sidekick, and I'm pretty sure one of our other College Aid pros is going to join us tonight. So we're really excited about that too. But Chuck, great to be back with you tonight.
Hey, it's great to have you back. That's one of my favorite things to do. And for Rinda, our other pro on the line, I just clicked to give you the ability to talk. So hopefully you can hear us and chime in as well as you see fit to join this the show that Dan and I put on every other week.
Rinda, are you there? I'm not sure what's going on there, but I promise you we'll get her helping out with this tonight. But hey,
she might be on mute, but I think she's good.
Okay, good. So hey, just a quick disclaimer for everybody that's with us tonight. We're going to do everything we can to try to answer your questions. Chuck and I also thought, and with Rinda's help as well, we talk a little bit about college funding in general. You know, just have a little conversation about it. Maybe pull up the software and show you, one of the advantages to the MyCAP program as far as what it does there. But one of the things we do want to make sure of is that you realize that tonight, since this is free advice that we're giving out, that we're not going to give you tax, legal, or investment advice. In those cases, you really do need to seek out a professional. So make sure that you connect with somebody. I mean, although this is what we do in our daily lives as College Aid Pro experts, and there are going to be some questions that you may ask that are beyond that that capability tonight. And in fact, I'd like to remind you that you always have the ability to use the coupon code OH for office hours 15, so OH15, to get a discount on our our consults that we offer on anything college related that you may have. So I would encourage you to take advantage of that. But without further ado, let's talk a little bit about college funding. And while we're doing that, again, I want to bring up the software, but Chuck, when you're thinking and coaching your families through the college process, where do you normally start? I mean, what's kind of your beginning? I mean, we're dealing with seniors, let's say right now, they're getting ready to figure out how they're going to pay that bill that's coming up here. How do you normally approach that?
So the first thing I always encourage them to do is, most families don't know that almost all schools offer a payment plan, and that the financial flexibility that comes with that is something they should look into. It's typically between $25 and $75 to set that up. And it allows you to kind of break those tuition and room and board payments down a little bit and help with cash flow. So that's one of the things I always like to remind them about. Obviously, hopefully we've already done our homework and selected a good school list and determined, exactly what it's going to cost. And hopefully our estimates were close by. So we've kind of probably already made a plan to some extent, if that makes sense. And now we're just making sure all those mechanical pieces are in place and they still make sense, as you're writing that first tuition check here anytime in the next day or so.
Yeah, and wouldn't you agree too? The other thing is, let's hope that they've had what I call the college money talk at the early stages of this whole process, so that they're not sitting back and that first they didn't get surprised when the first financial aid offer came through, which again, that's an estimate, as we're kind of working through it. Oh, by the way, quick reminder, please put your questions in the Q&A for us. Okay, if you would do that for us, we'd appreciate that. But again, hopefully they're not going to get this big, nasty surprise where it's even more expensive than they thought when that first bill comes in. And the good news is it's going to be half the year that's going to be due, so it's going to be part one that comes due for the fall, and then part two for the spring. And that you've mapped out, okay, so we love free money. So the scholarships and grants that have been received, so free money, saved money, earned money, debt money, and then finally I throw military money on there too, if you get a chance to use their GI benefits or the yellow ribbon. So those are kind of the 5 pieces of the puzzle. And I mean, we're truly hoping that you've mapped everything out and that you're ready to pull the trigger when that bill comes in. And I mean, that would include, by the way, I mean, we ought to talk about 529 plans, because we can at least, mention that there's the ability to take those distributions, correct?
Exactly. The 529, or if they have prepaid tuition hours in some cases, which are just a slightly different take on everything. And you said something that jogged my mind, and then when I went to say it, it slipped my mind. So I'll come back up with it here in just a minute.
That's okay. Yeah, and folks, don't forget, when it comes to the whole process of thinking about those loans, if loans are going to be part of your solution, we definitely think that you should look at the federal student loans first. Now, to be clear again, what that means is that, yes, it's $5,500, but that's $27,500 that would be in the fall and $27,500 in the spring. And then you've got to deal with, okay, how are we going to fill the gap? Is it going to be additional Parent Plus loans? Are you going to look at private, either parent or student loans? What are those options going to be? Are they going to consider home equity loans? Some of you folks have just unbelievable amounts of home equity out there. And I know things are a little bit different because of the interest rates that are being charged right now, but shoot, what the federal student loan, the direct student loan now is at 5.55%, right? And those Parent Plus loans are at 8.05%, plus the origination fee. It's on top of that. So
yeah, I've had a handful of clients look at 401k loans if they have significant balances where they're paying themselves the interest rate, and typically it's depending on the plan, 2 to 3, maybe 4% rate. So I have had people consider that now, and again, that's a personal choice, but where they feel most comfortable borrowing from. We're starting to get some questions. Do we want to jump in and start taking some of these?
Let's do it, man. Yeah, we can always hop in the software later on. Let's hop in there. Let's go for it.
All right, so I'm going to answer this one that came through the chat real quick. But again, Dan mentioned it. Please make sure all your questions go into the Q&A, not the chat. But it says, if I have an LLC, do I need to include those assets in FAFSA or CSS Profile? So essentially, I'm assuming that LLC is a business, and now both the FAFSA and the CSS Profile are going to ask for valuations on your business. Previously for the FAFSA, if it had less than 100 employees, you would not have had to do that. But going forward, regardless of the number of employees, they are going to ask for a value on that business. Dan or Rinda, anything to throw on top of that?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I was going to say is just make sure, the one thing that we don't know is how colleges are going to ever value your business. So it becomes your choice on how you're going to value it. And just like what we suggest with the home, that there's kind of a fire sale here, which is what's the value going to be? You can often put some kind of a value on, physical assets that you own, even, although depreciated, as well as any expenses that you're still paying on those kinds of things, the debt that you've got. But, it's definitely something that you need to take into consideration, because remember, this is not a one-year solution. This is a 4-year deal that we're talking about. And so whatever you put down, you got to make sure that you feel comfortable with that amount of it being a legitimate value for you.
Yeah, and I apologize for the barking dogs. I don't know why, but one of mine knows they can open the door handles and came in and barked at me and walked out. So there's your humor for the evening. I apologize for the noise.
Oh, there you go. All right, well, let me go into this next one. I gave a family member $90,000 as a loan or for one-time help. They're paying interest at the market rate. I remember you have to report what you have in checking and savings on the day you file the FAFSA. That's true, or the CSS for that matter. Well, the college asked where your fund is since you showed interest of $90,000 in last year's tax filing. Do I have to report $90,000 as an asset on the FAFSA, even if the fund isn't in the checking or savings account on the day of filing? Thank you. So interesting. I mean, number one, like you said, it's the value of those assets on the day you submit the 2 financial aid forms. And so just because there's interest showing on your tax return doesn't have any impact on what those asset values could be. Now, could they come back and say, if it's a significant number, could they come back and ask about it? Sure, they could. But in all likelihood, it's probably not going to be a problem. I mean, I just don't think that's going to be an issue, because the money's not in your hands, right? it's in somebody else's hands. It's being used for some other purpose. So I don't think it's a problem. Chuck?
Yeah, the only thing I'd clarify, it says a $90,000 loan, but then do I report in my taxes showed interest of 90,000. So I don't know if the loan was bigger and you received 90,000 in interest, which would essentially be income. I'm assuming that's going to flow through basically to your AGI and affect your SAI that way. But again, to the magnitude, I don't know. Is it interest on 90,000 or is it 90,000 of interest? That's something to.
Yeah, because let me tell you right now, if it's 90,000 of interest, whoa, they're going to ask them some questions.
Yeah.
That's a horse of a different color.
Yeah. All right. My student is entering her senior year. We have our schools picked out. I know that I have to do FAFSA when it opens. What else should I do at this stage? Well, this is a great question and one I love to encourage people to do. So the first thing is, if your student's a junior, just finished their junior year, going to be a senior year, you have a school list. I'm hoping that you have the full version of MyCAP, where you can go in and look at your school list and see how many of those schools are offering you merit aid. And if they are offering you merit aid, are there any that you could get more money from if you improved your SAT or ACT scores by, 10 points, 50 points, 100 points? And if so, put a little effort into that and try and retake those tests early in the year and see if you can't save yourself some additional dollars through the merit aid process. That would be the biggest thing I encourage my clients to do. With MyCAP, it's easy to see what those merit scholarships are and get an idea of, hey, for a very small increase in test scores, I might be able to get a big dollar increase in merit aid. So that would be my suggestion on that. Dan, Renda, anything to chime in with?
What you said is perfect with me. I don't know if Renda is live with us or what's going on there.
Here.
Hey,
Sorry.
Renda, there you are. Doggone it, you've been quiet, girl.
Yes, I'm sorry. I stepped away just as you were trying to introduce me earlier. I apologize for that, but
no problem.
no, I mean, I think if you've got a school list, and if you haven't been in MyCAP and double checked your list to make sure there are some affordable schools on there for you, I would do that at this stage as well.
That's good. So that kind of piggybacks this next question, by the way, because it says my daughter is graduating in the spring of 2024, just like we were just talking about. When should we start filling out the FAFSA and the CSS? So the CSS is on the same date that it's been for as long as I know, which is October the 1st. So that's when you can start working on it. And remember, the CSS profile is actually done through the College Board's website. Okay. The difference this year is that the FAFSA would normally be October the 1st, but it's now going to be sometime in December. We can't even tell you the specific date. So you just have to know that's what's going to happen. I've mentioned before that there's always this mad rush that people have to try to go onto the website and get it done on, at 12:01, on October the 1st. But the reality is the system is probably going to be overloaded by a lot of people that are freaking out, thinking that they've got to get in there and get it done. So sit back, take a deep breath, and just realize that when we get there, that it's still going to be okay to get it done, in a week or two after that. Let other people deal with the complications that are going to happen with the software getting overloaded and crashing and all the things that traditionally do happen with that system.
And also double check your due dates with the schools that you're applying to. Make sure you know exactly when those are and start at least a couple of weeks ahead of time to give yourself a chance to collect all the information you need.
That's a great point. And, as you complete the CSS profile and the FAFSA, what will happen is some schools will say, hey, we've received your FAFSA or your CSS profile, and it might give you an opportunity to open an account on their web portal. So like Alabama's MyBama, and each school has their own. And that's where you're going to find out if there's any missing information or kind of what your next steps are. So, after you complete those, I think the next great step is to kind of go through and make sure you've opened a portal for each school.
Good stuff. Chuck.
So it looks like we had a follow-up to the question in the chat. Again, I want to be real kind and ask you to put all your questions in the Q&A, not the chat, but I'll take this. So it looks like the LLC is a rental property. Yeah, so property is going to count as an asset, and you will need to include that.
Okay, and there was another follow-up to the other one too, which was recommended websites list for various scholarships. I'll just give you a couple of my favorites. Number one, the MyCAP software. The MyCAP software, because you have to remember, what's the number one best place to get money? It's from the colleges themselves. Why? Because those scholarships are annual, renewable, if your student does everything that's necessary to fulfill from year to year qualifying for those scholarships. But in addition to that, what you may not realize is on that same MyCAP opportunity are the private scholarships. We've got a private scholarship database on there from Peterson's that has, I don't know, several million, 5.1 million, billion, I don't know. It's a big number of scholarships that are available. Yes, it's going to take you going in and doing some individual research, but there's definitely some great options there. Another one that I sometimes suggest is going to a website called GoingMerry, MERRY.com. It's a really good one. There's a portfolio that your student needs to fill out of all the things that they've been involved with, and then it'll go through a filtering process. And then I would also suggest FastWeb. FastWeb is kind of the granddaddy of them all. It's been around a long time, and it's again another really good scholarship search tool. So those would be my suggestions. Anybody else?
Don't forget your guidance counselor's office. I mean, probably your best bet is to apply to the scholarships that your school has on their website or the guidance counselor has gotten information about. And also look, just do Google searches with your town or your municipality or county and look for, private foundations that give scholarships in your area, businesses that give scholarships and things like that in your specific area. There's a couple of my suggestions.
Very good suggestions, absolutely. All right, next one. Will a financial aid office treat you differently if you have space left on your HELOC versus if you don't? For example, if you have a HELOC limit of 50K and you have 47,000 in outstanding debt versus a equity line of 100K and you have 47,000 in outstanding debt on the line. So schools in general treat home equity different. For example, Northwestern and Stanford, if you have a similar amount of home equity, Northwestern is going to be considerably more expensive. So the first thing I would say is kind of a school by school basis. The second is, I think, for a lot of these financial aid offices, it's hard for them to verify the limit on your debt. And they're just going to, I think in general, probably take it at face value that, that's how much debt you have. So I would always, do whatever you feel most comfortable with. But when I would be calculating my home equity, I would count the full or maximum amount of the HELOC I could take out against it, even if I'm not using it, because there's nothing to say that at any time it could not become, in use or debt. But again, each person's different. What they're comfortable with is different. And, if a school has questions, they're just going to push back on it, to be honest.
That's good, Chuck. Yeah, that's right on. I have 2 kids in college now, and I'm working with my third one. It still seems hard to figure out how to find quality schools with good financial aid, especially merit aid. I want to find schools that will meet our financial need as determined by the FAFSA. Where do I find schools with generous financial aid? Easiest answer, make sure you plug your numbers in correctly into the MyCAP software, and lo and behold, you will see it. That's number one. The other thing that you can do is you also have the ability to use our advanced search tool that's in that platform, which is fantastic, where you can really dive in even deeper to it. There's just some great options with that. All right, Chuck, good for you. Why don't you show them what we're talking about here?
Yeah, so there's 2 parts to this. I'll go through very quickly. The first is your profile, and that's where you're going to put your personal information as it relates to your income, your academics, stuff like that. Oh, don't need that one, sorry. And you'll need to make sure it says 100% complete, but it's going to ask where you live. So they know kind of what's in state, out of state, the number of people in your household. They're going to ask for some high school rank, GPA, test scores, financial information. And you just need to fill in everything and make sure you get to where this says 100% complete. Once you have this, you have a super efficient and flexible tool to determine what schools are going to give you the most aid, whether it's need or merit. So you would do shop for schools and you would click on the advanced school search. And then you have all these fields. So you could say, any distance from home, any state that you're interested in, enrollment size, small, medium, large, major. So let's just do aerospace engineering, 4 years, and merit scholarships, automatic scholarships only. And now we're going to search for schools. And again, this is just based solely on the information I have in this dummy profile. And you'll start to see, is it affordable? And you can dive into these and kind of see, what the cost is going to be, what your merit scholarship would be based on the information you've put in there. Like New Mexico State, even though it's more expensive, it is a very generous merit scholarship. So it's cutting the cost of attendance about in half, giving me a $20,000 merit scholarship. Wichita State, $5,000. So you can kind of play with those settings and really start to see which ones are gonna fit you best. Anything to add there, Dan, in terms of better ways to use the advanced search?
Yeah, no, I mean, as we always say, Chuck, what is it? Junk in, junk out, right? If you put in junky numbers up the top as far as the details on your students' academics, or if you put in junky financial details, don't be surprised when the stuff that flows out the bottom isn't good either.
Yeah.
So it's just really important that you know that.
But once you have an idea about your students and the schools they're interested in, you can dive into these and really, start to look at the financial aid and the scholarships available. And you can see very clearly, in a lot of these schools, they'll have the test scores and the GPA and the dollar amount of these scholarships. And as you scroll down, once you get to one that you might qualify, you'll see it should highlight or throw a check mark in there. See.
Actually, you know what? Go up top because I don't think that had any merit money on it.
Okay. Oh, yeah. So,
Yeah.
But if you did, it would show up there. So, and that's a great way. Like I was saying earlier, okay, hey, I know I have an SAT score of 1330, and I'm getting $15,000. Well, if I can bounce that up to, I don't know what the number is, but let's just get it up to 1420, then I could have 19,000. So $4,000 a year over 4 years, that's $16,000. So that's a good thing you can be doing for your juniors right now as you go through your school list. And I'll stop sharing now and we'll get back to some more questions. Rhonda, can you see the questions in the Q&A?
I only see them after you guys have covered them, I think.
Okay. I was going to give you an opportunity to chime in if you wanted to. So I hope that answers the questions for the person who had 2 kids in college now and working on the 3rd one. One thing I do want to point out is this year's going to be a big change. With 2 kids in college, I don't know where they go and what type of school they are, but you could potentially lose a discount that you currently have with your EFC or SAI being split amongst your kids. So there is a chance that this year the tuition and the costs that you've been paying at the other 2 schools could potentially go up, unfortunately. And that's just subject to the change.
I'll tell you what, Renda, let's throw this one at you.
Okay.
Do state schools compete against each other's financial aid awards, merit aid, For example, IU Bloomington versus Purdue or versus another Big Ten school.
I'm trying to make sure I comprehend this question. Are the state, so if I apply to different state schools?
Yeah, Big Ten schools. In other words, are
Well,
Big Ten schools going to modify their merit aid award scholarships because you've applied to other Big Ten schools?
most of these schools are not given a lot of merit aid, or if any, first of all. And I doubt that they're gonna play ball with that. Most of them are, you get what you get.
Yeah, in fact, you're lucky if you get anything. Let's be
Yeah.
very clear, you know?
Yep.
But on that note, we at CAP like to be the forever optimists. And the thing we do tell you is you never get what you don't ask for. So, if you have the time and the energy and you want to appeal, and you think you have some circumstances that might, merit it, then go ahead and try. But again, we want you to have realistic expectations with that as well. Does the CSS profile consider my primary residence equity as an asset? Yeah, it's going to consider your primary residence as home equity. And if you have other real estate, the CSS will also put a value on those.
Perfect. Question about the scholarship link on MyCAP website. Can you please give a bit more definition about what scholarships are listed there? What types of scholarships should we expect to see there? Thank you. Yeah, so Chuck's going into that option for us to take a look at. And what you have to know when we're looking at the whole scholarship side of things is actually down a little further on the page there, Chuck.
Yeah, I got too many windows open covering my
up a little further, I think.
Up. Oh, private scholar. There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, so here's where the private scholarships are, and I'll let Dan continue. It's a very similar kind of search function.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: is you can see you can pick based on the state that you live in, the civic organizations that the student belongs to, areas of study, the institution they're actually attending, ethnicity, religion, military, or the amount. So, for example, Chuck, just go and click on the amount for a second and just show how that expands out. Let's say that you're going after these bigger scholarships, $5,000 to $10,000. Well, when he hits that, notice we went from over 100 pages to 11 pages now. And then based on that, you can see that these different options exist with different deadlines. And so you can see there's still scholarships that are available to the end of the month, but then we take a break, don't we? But you notice it goes all the way to October that we suddenly get to these bigger scholarships. Not uncommon that you'll find that these larger foundations have a later date between October and, say, traditionally the February-March timeframe as to when they might give out their money. Also remember this, unfortunately, the more zeros that are behind the scholarship amount, the more competition there is. So plan early and make sure that your students are taking a look at what the requirements are and whether or not they have what's necessary to make that happen. But just a great free tool that's part of your MyCAP software.
Yeah, so and I'd like to clarify, I guess, there, what we just showed you is private scholarships. So civic organizations, different things like Dan mentioned. When I clicked into LSU and showed you that list of scholarships, that's merit aid from the university. I guess you could call it through the endowment or, however you want to frame that. But the most important thing to realize is that about what, Dan, Brenda, 85% of all the scholarship dollars come from the universities themselves, and the remaining kind of 15-20% come from other organizations. So you want to make sure you're building a good school list and exhausting that school money first before you start diving into the private scholarships. And I think, people say you're looking at what, 10 to 15 hours for a $2,000 scholarship is kind of some of the numbers I hear thrown around.
Yeah, it just depends, right? Depends on whether you've got to write an essay, whether you've got an application, whether you've got to get letters of recommendation, all of those types of things that go into it. Here's the point. The more work that goes into those private scholarships, the more likely that the numbers are going to be fewer that are applying for it to some extent. you know, it just seems like the more things that get added to it, it just compounds that a little bit. But those options are out there, and you can, you know, your students can do that on top of what they're trying to get from the schools as well.
I'll take a swing at this one. So I'm self-employed and provide services, then there's no value in the business to sell, right? Well, you'll ultimately have to make that decision, but I think I understand where you're going with this. You know, if you went away tomorrow, there's nobody else to run the business or provide anything. So, you know, the value, you know, you may not have property, you may not have a ton of dollars or assets in a checking account because it may be paid out immediately in the form of your salary, something like that. I guess my statement would be to, you know, value the business as modestly as possible that you're comfortable with and can comfortably support, and let the school push back if they choose to. I've heard some people say, you know, businesses like that, and you know, sole proprietorships where it's a service, they might accept a zero value, but I've also heard that the minimum value they'll accept is going to be one time your kind of revenue or income. So you know, they may say, okay, hey, if your income from self-employment was 100,000, we're going to also value the business at 100,000. So I think that's yet to be seen. We don't have a sample to tell you exactly what the answer is. You're going to have to get comfortable with that. And you know, like I said, never lie, never be fraudulent, but whatever you feel you can modestly, whatever the lowest value you can modestly support is probably where you would fall.
Okay, great. So if the FAFSA is due in December, what do the schools do regarding early decision? It's a problem, isn't it, folks? I mean, let's face it, it is a big problem, but here's the thing that you need to know. The vast majority of colleges that do ED, early decision, are also CSS Profile colleges. And so the likelihood is what we've been told, and Matt Carpenter, one of our co-founders, has heard this through the grapevine, is that a school like NYU is just going to lean on the CSS Profile to do the preliminary financial aid offer. Now, could that change when the FAFSA is ultimately submitted? It could, but it also could not stay the same. I mean, it's going to depend on, honestly, which number is probably the larger of the two when it comes to the schools and how they handle their financial aid. Here's the point, folks. This is a unique year because of the rollout of the FAFSA simplification process that's going on. And we're just all going to have to learn together. The colleges are in the same boat we are, as families trying to work through this, and you know, as advisors with us trying to work with you. It's going to be an interesting time during the holidays this year, you know, with a lot of these financial aid offices probably having to still man their stuff in some capacity. Now, they may not be answering their phones. I'd be shocked if they are, but you know, there's going to be some work going on by everybody as we, you know, as everybody gets things done. So that's my take on it. Chuck, you got any ideas, or Rinda?
And the only thing I would add is, you know, I always encourage you to, you know, really do the due diligence on your school list. And if financial aid is that big of a deal, then, you know, use the estimates that are available in MyCAP. Make sure you understand what the potential costs are, and, you know, potentially, you know, maybe exclude a school if you know there's unlikely that you'll be able to afford it, or that you know it's that significant of an issue. I wouldn't want to scare you away, but we also don't want you to get so far down the road and then be disappointed if the award doesn't, you know, meet expectations. So those would be the only things I would add. Rinda, anything?
I actually just wrote an article about this for the College Aid Pro blog. And honestly, you've covered it. The only thing I would add is that this issue makes it all the more important for everyone to be checking the admissions websites at the schools where they're applying and staying up to date. Checking your emails from schools that you're applying to, staying up to date with all of the, you know, changes that could be happening with due dates and things like that.
I'm going to see if I can find that specific blog and paste it into the chat for people.
Okay, while you're looking for that, I'll go ahead and go to this next one. And It says, when you talk about merit aid, that is not automatic and you're still competing against other potential students. Is that right? Well, you might be surprised. There are two types of merit aid. Well, maybe more than that, but there's merit aid that is guaranteed. If a student has a certain GPA, a certain test score, if that's required, because in this day and age, a test optional, then it's very, very possible that that merit aid is going to be paid regardless. Now, there are definitely competitive scholarships that every college or that most colleges out there have, where there's additional requirements that are necessary, and or it has to go like before a review committee or things like that. So just know that that's the case. Merit is paid in three different ways. It's based on talent, athletics, and academics. That's where merit money comes from. And so, it's just a matter of doing your homework, doing your research ahead of time so that you don't have any surprises when it comes to whether that's the case. And you'll see that on the MyCAP software, by the way. We do have competitive listed. We also have automatic scholarships like Chuck just showed a few minutes ago. And then we also have scholarships that we think are likely, but it's all about trying to search, and find the ones that your student is going to qualify for.
Okay. Looks like we have a follow-up question. It was $90K loan, not interest. $90K was the amount given to a family member, but that amount was in my bank account collecting interest and reported on the tax return. In that case, I don't have to report on the FAFSA. Look, you're getting too granular here, and I don't want to misunderstand this. Anything that rolls down to your adjusted gross income is going to have to be reported based on the year they're asking for your income on the FAFSA. So where the money is or isn't, again, that's going to be an asset, not income. So the income is going to be based on your AGI. The assets, if they're in the account, you need to count them. If they're not, because you've given them out for a loan, I would assume you don't. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I hope that gives you enough information.
Okay, if residence is a line of credit for full value of the home, but nothing borrowed, is there a helpful way to report this on the FAFSA? Yeah, report the full value of the equity in the home. If the money hasn't been borrowed out, hasn't been used for anything, then unfortunately the full value of that house is considered in that case as equity, depending upon if the school takes it into consideration. Remember, if your kiddos are applying to FAFSA only schools, they're not going to take equity into consideration anyway. But if it's a CSS profile that does, then you're going to need to report that, unfortunately.
Okay. Sorry if this was covered earlier. If the second house is in India, should we be declaring the equity for that as well in FAFSA? Yeah, I mean, that's an asset that you own. There's not any exclusions that I'm aware of for assets held in other countries or anything. Dan, Renda, do you guys have an opinion on that? I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think an asset is an asset, and if you own it, you're going to have to report it.
Absolutely. Yeah. If it's on your books in any way, it's got to be reported somewhere. And if they start asking questions and you didn't disclose it, then you're going to have a tough conversation with somebody in the future.
I can take a swing at this one. How do you get scholarships for coming in as a transfer student? My child missed one form, SRAR, and A&M would not accept his application. He is set on going to A&M and wants to go to Blinn and transfer, but I'm afraid we won't be able to pay. I know he would have gotten good merit scholarships, so wondering if he should wait and try to go as a freshman later or go to Blinn and then transfer in. It's not cheap school and not sure how scholarships work when transferring. So there's a lot to unpack on this one. So the first is A&M really isn't that generous with merit scholarships. They have an unlimited pool of students that want to go there. And most of their aid is solely based on need. And depending on your situation, that's just a mathematical equation. In terms of going to Blinn and then transferring in, a couple things I'd comment on. some of those programs, if you get accepted from, you go to Blinn, meet your requirements, and then get accepted into A&M, it's generally into, general studies or liberal arts, and not into a specific program, like, engineering or business in a lot of cases. So you would want to make sure that whatever your student wants to study, that is a possibility of going that route from Blinn. So you would need to call Blinn and ask them, and then call A&M and ask, what you would need to do to be able to get into a specific program from Blinn. And then there was one last thing I wanted to add. Give me just a second. In terms of transfer students, again, your best bet at getting any kind of merit-based aid is going to be as, your first year freshman, not as a transfer student. So again, I think your best bet is going to be the, need-based financial aid if you qualify based on the formula. And then you'll want to just make sure that whatever your student wants to study, find out what the probability of being able to get into that program is. I hope that helps. I know it's probably not necessarily what you wanted to hear, but something to be aware of.
Hey, one other thing too, I know Wendy talks about this, is that we do have some transfer scholarships that are in the database for some of the colleges, so that's a possibility, but there you really have to dive into the details like Chuck was showing earlier with the merit scholarships, because it's not going to know that your student is necessarily transferring in. You're going to have to go looking for those opportunities. And I don't even know if it specifically shows specific dollar amounts, but it's something to check out as a possibility.
Yeah. And just to give you an idea, when I say they don't give a ton of merit, I had a client last year that had a 1520 SAT 4.0, good private school here in Houston, and he got no merit award or need-based award from A&M, and was not accepted into engineering at UT. So the Texas schools are highly, highly, highly competitive. So just keep that in mind.
Hey, Renda, let's give you one here. Going back to the FAFSA with CSS, would it be a good idea to start the application process before the dates, meaning October and December?
Well, the form won't be available before the dates, but what I do suggest is that before this happens, you can go in and do an estimate. For example, the FAFSA has a tool where you can estimate what your ESC or your new SAI, Student Aid Index, is going to look like. And you can also go ahead and start collecting your tax return information. Of course, a lot of that's going to populate automatically now, but make sure you have your passwords for all of your accounts so you can get in and find out what your asset balances are and that kind of thing. So you can do some prep work to be ready, but typically you need to wait. The other thing with the FAFSA is you can do your FSA ID ahead of time. And I don't know if we want to go into what that is. That's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, that's all right. Go ahead and talk about it just quickly.
Absolutely.
So in order to kind of sign your FAFSA, the student and one parent needs to obtain a FSA ID from the Department of Education. And it's basically, you have to go through a bit of a process to get it. It's kind of like a username and password, but you have to apply for it. They're going to go through some checks to make sure you are who you say you are. It could take a few days for it to, completely go through the process and stuff. So you can get started on that before the opening day for FAFSA.
Yeah, I put a link to the estimator and to the FSA ID in the chat. And correct me if I'm wrong, Renda or Dan, this year, aren't they doing a double check through the Social Security network or something? That may have been what Renda mentioned. I apologize. I was looking up the links while she was talking, but where previously your FSA ID would work kind of immediately, and now I think it's going to take a few days.
I don't have the details on that. Do you, Chuck? Or Dan, sorry.
You know what, I don't, but other than I do know that they're talking about it as far as being the contributors. That's the way that that the parents are going to be referenced in the future. And the whole process of verifying the student and verifying the parents is going to be different this year. So while it's supposed to be the FAFSA simplification, there's going to be some additional wrinkles when it comes to the way that that's handled. I mean, I love the idea though of you getting some things done early. One other thing I was going to suggest, because this has unfortunately happened before, is that somebody went in and they worked on a FAFSA before October the 1st. And as we just stated, it's not even going to open this year until sometime in December. And then they submitted it. Well, when you submit it, what you're really doing is you're applying for financial aid for the spring of your student's senior year in high school. So just keep that in mind. It's great to be anxious to get that done, but if you actually submit something, you may be doing yourself a disservice because it's applying for something that you didn't intend. So just be careful.
All right.
Okay, let's see here. Question: legally separated parents, we split our assets 50-50, cash only and no real estate. Do you know if the college asked for details of divorce agreements? An example, how assets were split between them, where's the custodial parents portion when they filed the FAFSA, considering custodial parents spend his or her time. So there's the past and there's the future as far as the way that divorce is handled. And we're only going to deal with the future because if we talk about the past, it's just going to confuse you. Moving forward, it's the parent who provides the most financial benefit to the child. And so in your case, somebody's got to be spending $1 or $2 or more, on the student. Now, the thing we don't know, and I really don't know this answer, maybe you guys do, but is A, how they're going to police that, and B, why they didn't just come out and say, and oh, by the way, if you're 50-50, we're going to expect the parent who has the highest adjusted gross income to, do that. That's not the way that we understand it's going to work. The only clarification we have right now is that it's the parent who provides the most financial benefit to the child. And so just get ready.
Yeah, and keep in mind, that's only FAFSA schools, right? Like a lot of the CSS Profile schools are going to require both parents regardless. And if you've remarried, it may include your new spouses. So, that's something to keep in mind too, based on your school list. And I put that link into the CSS Profile, how they treat custodial parents in the chat.
Yeah, Chuck, that's great, right? Because there are some schools out there that do not take that non-custodial parent in, and that's a big deal. Places like UNC Chapel Hill, for example, don't require it. Do your homework. Don't be surprised or deal with the shock and awe that comes with not knowing the whole story.
All right, so we got a question. What is the funding gap? And I'm going to share my screen because I assume that came from seeing MyCAP. Where is that? Okay. Sorry, I got too many windows open again. Let's back out of here. All right. So I think it was when I did the search. So let's just assume that. We're going to say in Texas, and we'll just go from there. See what comes up. Okay, yeah, so funding gap equals 0 in this case. When you complete your profile, there's a college budget section. So it's going to ask you, do you have 529 plan? Have your parents pledged any assets? Is the student going to work? Are their grandparents helping? Stuff like that. And it's going to give you a 4-year college budget of, whatever your data that you put in is. So in this dummy case, it's 87,600. And oh crap, sorry, that defeated my test. But again, if you go back to Texas, search. Basically, what this is saying is that 4 years at Dallas International University comes in under my 87,400 number or whatever. So there's no funding gap. But as you go further down, maybe I can sort this by funding gap. See if certainly there's going to be at least a school in here where there is a gap at some point. I should have put 4-year schools. Sorry, that's why there's so many.
Yeah, there's a lot of little 2 years that are popping up, community colleges, right?
Exactly. I thought I'd be able to reverse it and get the expensive schools at the top. But if nothing comes up on this next click, you'll just have to take my word for it. But yeah, essentially, we'll try one last time because I do think this is important. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, your SAI EFC number is where
Too
it is.
high. Yeah.
It's just producing a. Hey
All
man, it
right.
was worth a try, folks.
Yeah.
What he's showing you is absolutely the right way to do that. That's what the college funding gap is.
Yep. So, yeah. So hopefully that's helpful and gives you a little bit of information.
Yeah, I'm not understanding the confusion on the merit scholarships. So maybe give us some more clarification as to what you're really looking for there. So next one, income tax paid on College Aid Pro refers to which line of the 1040? It's line 22 of the 1040. So that's what it's referring to, is line 22. So that's the number that you plug in there. Can I add state tax paid to? No. No, you just go with federal tax return line number 22.
I've purchased a home for my parents to live in. It is not my primary home nor rental property. Do I have to add it in the FAFSA or CSS profile? It is in fact an asset. So in general, yes, I would say you're going to have to add it.
If it's titled to you, I mean, if it's
yeah.
in your title to your name, yes. Yeah. Okay, I watch PEG. We love PEG. Very helpful video on the CSS profile line by line, which would have been for last year. Her recommendation was to skip over most or all of the optional questions on the CSS profile. That's correct. I'd like to learn more about the reasoning behind this strategy. Is this so you can have a change to report when asking the school for a better offer under professional judgment? For example, reporting 45 in medical expenses that wasn't reported earlier. Would the strategy to skip optional questions change at all if getting a pre-read? Well, okay, so number one, and that was one thing that we should have talked about a little earlier. If a college will give you a pre-read on an ED, then I think you should go for it, because it's one of those ways that you've got the ability to get a sense of what the school will do. Now, just realize not every school will do that. And in fact, maybe it's going to be a tougher spot for them to be in because of not having some kind of a FAFSA, guesstimate. But what I will say is this. You can't, financial aid officers cannot unsee what they've seen. If you put something down and then go back to them and say, but we listed this and we listed that, and we gave you all the factual details up front, you've lost any leverage. And that's really what PEG is suggesting to you, is that there are sometimes with some things that you need to keep in your hip pocket so that you can share that, so that you might have a chance to get them to reassess your situation. One of the prime examples of this sometimes happening is a total surprise to families is when they forgot that they did like a rollover of an IRA or a 401k plan, right, Chuck? And they get that nasty little surprise where their EFC or their SAI moving forward is so high and they don't understand why. And it's because it's buried in the numbers, because if you use the IRS data retrieval tool.
Yeah. So that's a great point. If you had a rollover and left a job and had a rollover, you might want to consider doing a manual entry of the information to make sure that that doesn't impact and bounce up your SAI unexpectedly or incorrectly.
That's good.
All right. This one might be better suited for my man Dan, but I'll take a swing at it. My student is not a great test taker, and I'm not sure she should focus on SAT, especially considering all the schools she is applying to are SAT, ACT optional. She has straight A's, is a club leader in 3 clubs, works as a babysitter. Thoughts on SAT issue as per financial aid? So in general, I don't know what your school is, so that I don't know, but I would encourage everybody to take it and then look at your test scores and see if they put you in the top 25% of a given school of the historical incoming class. And I'll actually show you real quick on MyCAP where you can kind of see that. If you click into any school and then go to admissions, you can see the SAT verbal range, SAT math range. So that's the middle 50%. So if your scores are above that number, that means you're, in theory, in the top 25% of historical incoming freshmen. And in general, I think I'll leave it up to Dan to chime in, but I would say if you're in the top 25%, it's certainly not going to hurt you in most cases, would be my opinion. So that's kind of how I feel about that. And the other thing is, again, what I was saying earlier, the more you take those, the more you might have an impact to automatic merit scholarships, with just a little bit of improvement. And if you're not a great test taker, there are things, you can do. There's test prep companies or individuals in your area that may help you out. I know the SAT offers the student answer service, so you can actually see which questions you got right or wrong on a given test. So there's things that you might be able to do, but those would be the things I would throw out there, and I'll let Dan and Renda chime in if they've got anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, truly, the only thing I was going to say is that definitely go to each college and see how they approach the scholarships, how they approach admissions, because if they are test optional, there are truly a bunch of schools out there that are test optional, both for admissions and for scholarships. Now, it may get a little more difficult when you get to the more competitive scholarships where they're going to suddenly expect to see some test scores. But again, you'd be surprised. I mean, there are plenty of options out there because the schools know, and they're proving it to themselves that if you don't believe me, go to the website Fair Test. Fair Test list a bunch of colleges or list all the colleges out there that are test optional. That it still may be a chance for your student to get some money and get admitted.
And one other thing to add, in Houston, where I live here in Houston, Texas, there's a group called the HARN, the HARN.org. It stands for Houston Area Recruiting Network. And it's all the schools that have somebody that live locally and recruit from the local Houston high schools to get kids to go to their campus. And you can make friends with those recruiters and ask them specifically, hey, do you guys weight grades more heavily than test scores or test scores more heavily than grades? And they'll give you a good idea. And then, I would encourage you to reach out to those people, make them your best friends. And, the better relationship you have, you never know. They might be the ones reading your application or your essays and might actually advocate for you. So that's something else to keep in mind. Again, I just know the one here in Houston, but I believe they have them, in most big cities and metro areas nationwide. All right, we've got 2 minutes. Dan, anything you want to close with?
Other than there's a question about when to apply for merit scholarships, and I would just say this: for private scholarships, students can apply for those at any time as long as they meet the requirements. GPA, test score, grade in school. It may be that they have to be a junior or a senior to apply for those. So I would say just make sure that you do the research and understand what the requirements are. For colleges, absolutely, the only time you can apply for those scholarships is when you submit those applications in the fall of the senior year. I mean, that's what it's all based on. But that's all I've got.
Yeah, you guys were great. This is one of the first times since I've joined Dan in doing this that we have not got through every question in the Q&A. So a small apology for that, but a big thank you for participating and asking a lot of good questions. Huge thank you to Renda for joining us again.
Yeah, thanks for letting me chime in.
Yeah, thanks, Renda. And folks, thanks for joining us tonight. We will be back in 2 weeks on Monday again. Happy to answer your questions, and keep your eyes open for other webinars that are going on. We've got some exciting things. In fact, tomorrow night, there's a big webinar that's going on to introduce you to all the different services and opportunities that are available through College Aid Pro. And so I invite you to do that. Hopefully you've gotten an invitation for that. If not, please reach out to support@collegeaidpro.com, and I'm sure they will be happy to send that to you. But again, Chuck, great being with you tonight. You too, Renda, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks, folks. Take care, everybody.
Enjoy your summer.
And happy 4th of July, everyone.